Let's talk about what generative AI actually is. And hopefully, this is going to be the non boring version of this. Because I know that everybody feels like, oh, we have to include all these definitions. I am just so not into that at all because you don't really need a ton of tech here. But I do think this is interesting to know, and it's going to give you a good grasp of how this works. And that's going to be helpful going through when we think about how do we use it ethically, all that kind of stuff. But importantly, I'm not going to spend a ton of time here because you don't really need to know how your iPhone works, for example, before ordering a latte or an Uber or something like that. But it is good to talk about it because, first of all, you'll just hear the term generative AI a lot and you'll want to know about that. But also just because this is going to, again, be the basis of when we're talking about generative AI, you'll have now a little bit of a clearer sense. So we're going to talk about generative AI, large language models, all that kind of stuff, how they are put together and not where they come from. I don't care about the evolution, but what you need to know right now. To begin, let's clarify some terms that you might have heard, right? So AI, artificial intelligence, obviously, machine learning, generative AI, large language models. So you'll see these kind of concentric circles. Okay, so AI is essentially the broadest category, right? That includes all these intelligent systems, and it really includes any computer system designed for tasks that should require human intelligence. So, visual perception or speech or decision making or language translation, things like that. Now, ML, machine learning, is a subset of AI, and that focuses on systems that can learn from data, which is very cool, right? So while these traditional AI systems follow, explicitly programmed rules, machine learning algorithms have found a way to improve their performance on these specific tasks through experience and adapting and learning from patterns in data without explicitly being programmed for every scenario. So they're sort of improvising a little bit, if that makes sense, from the data. So, for example, a machine learning model could analyze, thousands of customer reviews or something like that to predict whether future reviews are going to be, positive or negative. And how does it do that? Well, it does that by learning to recognize patterns in language that, indicate sentiment or something like that in the case of reviews. By the way, you see why we're using the term artificial intelligence, right? It's because it's kind of how we learn as well. It's intelligence. Okay, generative AI. Generative AI, which is what we're talking about today, is an increasingly important subset of machine learning. And this really represents this big leap forward in AI capabilities. So while traditional machine learning models are often designed for tasks like classification, prediction, things like that, generative AI models can create entirely new content. So these models learn patterns from huge amounts of data, right? So often if you ever hear about training data, that's what we're talking about because this is the data that's being used to train the machine. And they use that knowledge, these generative AI tools, they use that knowledge and those patterns to produce new outputs like text and images and music and even code, the stuff that you've seen, right? So again, let me just to illustrate this and the difference here. So a traditional machine learning model might look at thousands of paintings or something, right? To clarify and classify art styles and identify specific artists, things like that. But a generative AI model would do the same thing. I mean, it could use all that understanding of artistic things, but not just to identify it, excuse me, but also to create this entirely new original painting that didn't exist before, right? So it's the difference with machine learning from recognizing a Van Gogh through patterns, which is hard to do for a machine. The difference between that and generative AI, which is like creating a new artwork like in Van Gogh's style or something like that, which to me is kind of crazy. I don't know. Okay, large language models. So large language models, you'll see LLMs a lot. Just remember that LLMs, large language models. That's a specific and particularly powerful type of generative AI. And that's, we're going to be talking about this a lot. This is focused on processing and generating human-like language, right? So these models, they're like, ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a large language model. They're trained on this huge amount of data. I'm talking billions of words from books and articles and websites and all that kind of stuff, which they find on the internet. And that's the training data that allows these large language models to understand and generate human-like text, um, across this really wide variety of topics and tasks. So again, a traditional machine learning model might identify the text of Hamlet and sort of pick out the patterns and themes and predict which character is speaking based on the language because it's basing it on patterns. An LLM, large language model, would go a step further. It takes that style, understands it, understands the themes and languages, and it essentially creates like Hamlet Part Two, which would probably not be that great. But you see what I'm saying? It is able to take that and beyond just recognizing it, actually do something with it. In this case, generate it, making new characters, new themes, things like that. So again, it's the difference between analyzing existing literature and creating new literary works inspired by what it analyzed. And again, you see why we're calling it this kind of intelligence, right? AI, and we say AI, but think about it, artificial intelligence. It's how we learn as babies. If you think about it, how our human intelligence works. We test out words, we figure it out, we find patterns one sentence at a time, and then we can actually start generating it ourselves.